Here are your AARP top tips on shortcuts to happiness. Research has found that people over 50 often get happier as they age. Along with proper sleep and diet, here are some more ways to boost your bliss, according to the experts. See the morning light. Sunlight boosts serotonin, a chemical your body produces to regulate mood and improve your ability to focus. Try taking a morning walk to absorb some sun. That early dose of daylight also helps you get better sleep at night. Get in micro-exercise. If you can't do a regular workout each day, at least take a short walk, even if it's just for 5 minutes. Or you can lift hand weights or do balance exercises. Even a small amount of exercise can help reduce stress. Tidy up. A little decluttering each day can also lighten your mood and ease your mind. Getting organized could lead to better sleep, improved relationships, and even weight loss. Reach out. See friends or visit family. Reconnect with old pals. If a good friend is far away, set an annual time and place to meet. Or join a group and make new friends. Meditate. Just 5 minutes a day of quiet reflection can do wonders to relieve anxiety, neutralize negative thinking, and clear your mind. If you don't know how to get started, there's plenty of guidance available in books, classes, and apps. For more tips to stay healthy, visit aarp.org/health.
Welcome to the show! Get ready to meet your host for the night, Arizona's very own hip historian himself, Marshall Shore!
Well, hello and good evening. Happy July 8th. Oh my gosh, you know, there's so much going on and we've got a great show for you here tonight. So I want to say welcome to you all. And thank you all so much for taking time out of your day and joining us. Regardless of how you're doing it, we're happy that you're here. Now, today is, you know, I'm happy you're here because I know there's also a basketball game going on. The second one of this Phoenix Suns being in the National NBA Championships, which is kind of exciting. But, you know, I've got my Thursday night to do, so here we are having some great fun. Now, this date back in 1930, the Arizona Supreme Court upheld the right of Cochise County to move the county seat from Tombstone over to Bisbee. And the next year, they opened up that amazing Art Deco courthouse in Bisbee. If you've never been, it's quite spectacular inside and out. Well worth a visit. Now, yesterday was also National Dive Bar Day, and so we have an homage to that as well as an on-theme cocktail for our tonight's guest. So my name is Marshall Shore, and what can you expect tonight? Well, you know, we're going to have a little bit of Little Arizona. We're going to have some music history from Arizona. We'll have a little bit of trivia with our special guest, as well as we do have a cocktail. And of course, there's some show and tell. So if this is your first time here, you might wonder, who is that man? Why is he on my screen? Well, you know, a little over 21 years ago, I was working in Brooklyn at a library, a beautiful Carnegie building, and decided to trade that for the Wild West and a 1950s branch library that has been is now gone, but it's been replaced with a really nice modern building. So it's in South Phoenix, and there was this rich oral tradition of kind of the community, how it had gotten to where it was. And that was one of my cues to be like, hey, you know, let's start looking at that modern history that we have right here. Now, to do that, we loaded everything we own into a big orange cube to get here. And, you know, they have their World International headquarters right here in the Valley of the Sun. Now, promptly upon arriving in Arizona, we moved into a 1956 ranch. Now, when we moved in, it was oh so many tones of beige, an annoyingly number of beiges. I'm happy to say now is a simplified two-tone of seafoam and cantaloupe. And there's what my kitchen looks like today. Still filled with all that buttercream yellow tile, matching appliances. Our house is really a time capsule, stuck in 1956. Now, as soon as I got here, all I kept hearing about how there was no history here. But every time I went for an adventure, whether it was on foot, on bike, in a car, short, long trips, it didn't matter. I kept running across so many amazing people, places, and stories. And then there's that post-war boom that I think in a lot of ways made the Arizona that we all know and love today. All those GIs that either were stationed here, trained here, or passed through on their way to somewhere else. And after the war, they were moving here in huge numbers. And then there was this man, Willis Carrier, the man who invented air conditioning. He forever changed how Arizona would interact with our environment. And so today we can now sit around in a lap of luxury and enjoy some cool air coming out of vents or from our window. So thank you, Dr. Carrier. On a day like today, we're happy you did what you did. So I'm also known as the hip historian, and that means I get to do a lot of fun things. It's like we just did, I actually just signed up to do a program next month with the Musical Instrument Museum, talking about Arizona music. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to go get a chance to tour the museum and really look at their Arizona archives, see what they have, and tie that in. I've also done a couple of podcasts that have recently come out in the last couple of weeks. Actually, one was from a woman who grew up here in Phoenix, who's now in New York. And so if you want to, I will show you how you can follow and find out more about those things. Now, some of you may have noticed that there is a chat session off to the side of the screen, and you can also, I love how Pam says, hey, you know, I love seeing the Cochise Courthouse right next to Dive Bar Day. I couldn't let Dive Bar Day go without a little celebration. So, you know, because most of my best stuff actually comes from chatting with people. I mean, just last night I was out and ran into some really amazing music history that I have a feeling I'm going to utilize some of that probably for the Musical Instrument Museum presentation, but also on here as well. And a chance to possibly sit down with some folks who are definitely music history makers right here. Now you can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, email. If you have an idea or a comment, maybe you know somebody who I should be chatting with. Now, if you are watching on Facebook, I will ask you to click on that little share button down below so that way all your friends can see after the game what amazing fun we are having with Arizona history. So first, we're going to talk about Little Arizona. Now, you know, I mentioned being from New York, but I actually grew up in a little tiny town in the Midwest in Indiana of 25 people. 2 roads, 1 stop sign. Actually, it was a yellow stop sign long past when they standardized red stop signs. It was kind of the place where time went to die. So, but you know, but with that, I really kind of developed an affinity, I think, for small towns as well as urban environments. And so we're going to talk about a little town called Yarnell that is up in Yavapai County. They have a population of 739. Now, it was founded back in 1865 when gold was discovered. Like so many towns, it has ties to mining. Now, the community is named for Harrison Yarnell, who was a later prospector of the Yarnell mine. The road that goes through Yarnell was paved in 1933. Now, if you're traveling through there, I mean, look at that little picturesque valley. You also notice that Just before you get into town, there is a rest area that was built in 1925 that you can still stop in and take a rest, as well as some old buildings left over from some of that mining territory, as well as you can also go visit ghost towns nearby like Stanton, Octave, as well as Congress. Now, in Congress, you also find Skull Rock, which was supposedly painted by railroad crews pulling a prank on riders. And the community ever since then has kept it painted so you can still go see Skull Rock. Now, another thing you'll also find is the Shrine of St. Joseph of the Mountains. Back in 1939, a Tucson artist went up and created these statues nestled in the mountainside. And you can still go by and see those statues there today. Now, it was also the site of, back in 2013, the Yarnell Hill fire, where 19 firefighters lost their lives. And with that, they did open up a memorial park to them. And so these are actually photos from our special guest this evening, who I'll introduce in just a moment. And so as a commemoration for those firefighters. Now, it would not be a happy hour without a cocktail. And so to kind of commemorate Dive Bar Day, as well as kind of firefighting history, we are doing what is called a Smokey and 7, kind of a riff off of a dive bar classic, which would be a 7 and 7. So we're using a little bit of Del Bach Dorado whiskey, some lemon lime soda, and a slice of lime. So it's nice and easy to make. And let's see if, there we go. We can bring on my silent bartender. So PJ's got me set up really nice. So I just dump that in. And then I pour in some soda and voila. We have a Smokey and 7. A nice little riff on just a classic nice and refreshing. All right. Oops. All right, so moving on. So through the miracle of technology, maybe modern, maybe not so modern. Oh my gosh, we have Mark Moorhead. And so let's go ahead and bring on Mark. Oops, wait a minute. Nobody wants to see the bartender now because he's done doing his job.
Yeah, he may be a better guest than I am.
Oh, I highly doubt that.
Well, how are you, Marshall?
I am good. And yourself?
I'm doing well, thank you. Honored to be with you tonight, and honored to be for all those few discerning people who know that this is probably a better show even than the fantastic Phoenix Suns. Go Suns, by the way.
Exactly. Go Suns.
About him here at the museum.
Right. But, I mean, there's still learning to be had. So there you go. So we're going to have a fun time learning all kinds of great stuff.
Absolutely.
And so where do you work?
Well, I work here at the Hall of Flame Museum of Firefighting, which is in Phoenix, right on the edge of Tempe. We're right across Van Buren from the back 40 of the Phoenix Zoo. And we're actually face the SRB building. As a historian, you're probably familiar with Legend City.
I was going to say, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We're in that same little kind of entertainment district, which used to, boy, your Smokey and 7 looks good. We're across from where Legend City used to be. It's now the SRP building, right next to what used to be called, I guess it still is, Phoenix Municipal Stadium. But Phoenix Muni used to be the spring training home of the Oakland A's. and now it's the home of ASU baseball. And then across Van Buren is the zoo. So there was all kind of, you know, at one time there was all kind of one little entertainment district here. And we are very glad to be part of what's still hanging on here. We're the world's largest historical firefighting museum. And we have been here, we've been in this location since 1973. We started in Wisconsin in 1961, year before I was born. So when I say we, it's the editorial we. But we have grown slowly in that time into a really big firefighting museum.
Yeah, I didn't realize you guys had been in that location since the early 70s. Wow.
Indeed. Yep, we've been, and at one time, what's now Gallery 1, my favorite part of the museum, the 19th century and earlier hand and horse-drawn stuff, was the whole museum. It's gradually expanded to we now have 4 big galleries, various little side galleries, and a lot of really fun and interesting and moving, in some cases, things to see.
Right. And so, you know, and for those of you who watch the show, you know, we are getting ready for some trivia that Mark has created so that way he can tell some great stories about the museum. And in case you've not been, entice you to turn your wheels and pull in next time you're driving by, because it's well worth a stop.
Absolutely. We sure hope people will do that. Like I said, we've been around for a long time. And I think, I mean, I have to admit it, Marshall, when I came here, I've been in the Valley since the early 90s. And I eventually came to this job because a friend of mine had this position and he was moving on. But for years, when I would go by, I would kind of just snicker at the name. I always tell people we're the only museum I know whose name is a pun. And I thought it was some kind of tourist trap, probably. And it's not. When I got here and my friend took me on a tour here, I realized that this was it's a fun place to go to, and it's a great place to bring kids. Having said that, we are in our way. A serious firefighting or, you know, a serious history museum that takes it from the angle of firefighting.
Right. Well, yeah, no, because I know the first time I got to visit was I was actually going off to a meeting in Tempe, and I was running really early, and I was like, oh, I now have a chance to stop in and spend time at the museum.
Yeah.
And I was not expecting when I walked through the door, I was like, I was amazed. I was not expecting to see what I saw.
Yeah, we're the TARDIS. We're bigger on the inside than we are on the outside. You know, is the impression people get. But, you know, I think it's also, even people who might be interested in it, I think, don't always kind of really grasp the sweep and the scope of the stuff that we have here.
Indeed. All right. So let's go do some trivia. Now you can keep track of it. Some folks keep track of it in the chat session. Some people keep track of it on a pad and paper. You can do whatever you want. If it makes you happy, you just do it.
That's certainly my philosophy.
Indeed. All right. So the Hall of Flame Museum is A, the largest historical firefighting museum in the world. B, the oldest historical fighting museum in the world. Or C, the largest museum of Olympic torches in the world. Now, hopefully none of you guessed C after Mark's great intro.
Well, yeah, I know. I kind of gave this one away, I guess.
That's okay. You know, people might not have been listening.
But if people weren't paying attention, exactly. That's the value of paying attention.
Exactly. Maybe
should I give the answer, Marshall?
Smoking 7.
What's that? Oh, yeah, that's true. A couple of these.
Making themselves a cocktail.
All of the answers sound right. Yeah. Now, do I give the answer, or do you?
Actually, we're going to do that after we take a little bit of a music break, and then we'll go through the answer.
Okay.
So, yeah. All right. So this early hand pumper, A, ran on kerosene. B, could also fire small cannonballs. Or C, was built 7 years before George Washington was born. So do you think that early hand pumper right there, basically one of those 3 facts is correct? The other 2 are not. I'll leave that up to you to figure out which one that is, although we'll tell you in just a bit. Which one is true? All right. The mural on this hand pumper shows that it is from where? A, Massachusetts, B, New Hampshire, C, Rhode Island. So this early hand pumper came from what state? And you can tell by the mural. All right, this hand pumper was used to fight A, the Great Chicago Fire of 1871, B, the Peshtigo Fire of 1871, or C, the Great Seattle Fire of 1889. All right, so which do you think that relatively red and black hand pumper, what was it used to fight? All right, and here we are at that halfway point. This Phoenix Fire Department wagon from 1910 used A, steam power, B, sodium bicarbonate, or C, nitroglycerin. So what do you think that this early wagon, pre-statehood, what did it use? Hey, Sarah, good to see you. Happy you're joining us. All right, so question 6. This 1951 American LaFrance fire truck hails from, not France, but is it A, Miami, Florida, B, Miami, Arizona, or C, Miami, Ohio? So we see it says Miami on the door, but which Miami is it? All right. And so this 1921 Seagrave fire truck served the city of, was it A, Tucson, B, Bisbee, or C, Phoenix? All right, moving on to question 8. This rig carried the Granite Mountain Hot Shots, 19 of whom died in the Yarnell Hill fire back in 2013. The Granite Mountain Hot Shots were based in A, Prescott, B, Wickenburg, C, Sedona. So where were the Granite Mountain Hot Shots? Where were they based in? All right. Question 9. Smokey the Bear is the symbol of the U.S. Forest Service. The first official real Smokey hailed from where? A, Arizona, B, New Mexico, or C, Alaska? All right, and coming up on our last question, this alarm room, which became highly influential on alarm rooms around the country and internationally, originated right here in Arizona in the city of A, Glendale, B, Phoenix, C, Flagstaff. All right, so that alarm room, which we'll learn a lot more about as Mark tells us the story of, why is it at the Hall of Fame Museum? All right. So while you are gathering your answers, we are going to take a little bit of an Arizona music break. And so tonight we are talking about Sanford Clark, who passed away just a few days ago. Now, some of you may know Sanford. His biggest hit song was called "The Fool." He was born actually in Tulsa, Oklahoma, but raised here in Bisbee and started performing in bands in the early 50s. And in 56, this song came out. Now, it was co-written by Lee Hazelwood, and he had been a little down. I was like, he was trying to make it as a songwriter, and he was kind of down to his last dime. And so he was hustling around and was actually able to get free studio time and even some pressings for this song called "The Fool." Now, one of the cool things is in this photo, they're in front of Madison Square Gardens. And so it is not only Sanford Clark as well as Lee Hazelwood, but it is also Dwayne Eddy, who went to school with Sanford and recommended him for this song. And so this is the song that launched the career of Lee Hazelwood, because it was like they sent these records off and suddenly they realized they had a hit, and it went beyond just the country music scene like they thought it would, but it crossed over into the pop scene. He also became a big influencer on to Elvis Presley. I mean, here's a handful of records that he recorded. He passed away at the age of 85 just 4 days ago. So, all right. Now, who's ready for some answers? All right. So, the Hall of Flame is the largest historical firefighting museum in the world. So, it's A.
That's right. We started in Wisconsin when a guy who's quite important in business here was spotted a fire truck and said to his family, his wife and son, gee, it'd be fun to have one of those. And so this was in 1955 in Wilmette, Illinois. And what do you get for the man who has everything, right? So this is a gentleman named George Getz Jr., who his wife, Olive, thought, okay, I'll send the son back to buy that truck. And he was just kind of a classic Midwestern rich guy. He had his hands in a lot of commercial real estate, and he was partner of the Chicago Cubs at one time, I understand. Anyway, he got this truck for Christmas in 1955, and somehow they kept it a secret from him. They surprised him. He loved it, and he started giving his kids and neighborhood kids rides in it. And the next thing you know, he started collecting more and more fire trucks. And some crony of his said, you decided to start a museum. And this guy said, you should call it the Hall of Flame. And so it was 1961, really not that long after he got his first fire truck, that he had enough to start a small museum in Kenosha, Wisconsin. A few years after that, the family kind of moved out here. I think it was for somebody's respiratory health. There was a time, they don't do it anymore, but there was a time when they sent people out here for their respiratory health. And they came out here, they brought the collection with them. And it was for a couple of years, it was in Scottsdale, but then we came to our current location, as you said, in the early 70s. And we've been here ever since, and we've gradually grown into the largest historical firefighting museum in the world. We're not the oldest firefighting museum in the world. Firefighting museums, it's actually a popular genre for museums. There are at least 200 of them in this country, many in other countries. But as far as we know, we're the biggest, and we're international. We're not parochial to any specific area. We have, if you count our patch collection, we have stuff from every continent, even Antarctica.
Well, and that was what I was amazed by, was the fact that I was expecting it to just be Arizona and not, and then you walk in and it's all this stuff from across the globe.
Sure.
Through the ages.
Right. We don't have many big trucks from other countries, not because we wouldn't love to, we would, but it's prohibitively expensive to bring big trucks from other countries. We do have one from Lima, Peru, from 1913, one of our oldest fire trucks. We also have a truck. We have a truck from Germany, a Unimog from a couple of little towns on the North Sea in Germany. That's in storage right now. And we have a beautiful British truck, an ERF, an ER Foden, from Nottinghamshire, whatever, however you say it, where Robin Hood did his thing. So we do have a couple of pieces. The other pieces we have from all over the world, and we do have lots, are things like helmets and smaller pieces of equipment, and of course patches. We have a collection of about 6,000 patches. And it's all here for you to see.
Indeed. All right. So this early hand pumper C was built 7 years before George Washington was even born.
Yeah. I kind of use that in the tours a lot with little kids because it helps them kind of really get a feel for how old some of this stuff is. This is the oldest big piece that we have, and it's a hand pumper. And as you can see, the end facing us has a little hopper. That's because in 1725, when this was built in England, machines like this were built in Holland in the mid to late 1600s. Again, a guy named Jan van der Heyden developed these pumps. They were very successful. Other countries started knocking them off. This is a British knockoff. But by 1725, they didn't even have very good fire hose. That whole idea of a flexible but still watertight tube, that wasn't such an easy technical nut to crack. So at the far end of it, you can see the hopper. That's where they still had the bucket brigade, but instead of feebly trying to throw the bucket of water in the fire, the last person in line would pour their bucket of water into that. That tub holds about 80 gallons of water, and you have pump handles on either side, and the crew would pump up and down.
Oh, hence the name hand pumper.
Exactly. It was manual power, and you can see that big brass upward angled pipe called a branch pipe on the top. That's where the water came out. Essentially, it's a big squirt gun. It's just a big old super soaker. But if you really got it going, you can get about 60 gallons of water a minute out of that thing. So, you know, it seems a little primitive to us now, but it was genius. It was, if you compare it to just pitifully trying to throw buckets of water on a fire, which was really all they had, it was this huge leap forward in firefighting technology. And it really, I mean, I think you can argue that it was one of the things that allowed the Industrial Revolution to happen, you know, as people were going more to the cities and population centers are growing and getting denser. You had a lot more fires, tons more fires. And we don't think about it today, but everybody had fire in their house every day. You had to pretty much everybody in the world did, to you know, to heat your house, to light your house, to cook your food. And houses really burned. I mean, depending on where you were in a plank shack or a log cabin or a bamboo hut, and you had a tar roof or a thatched roof. And so houses, I mean, fires are still too common, but they were much more common in those days. They would, you know, fires happen, and wouldn't be just your house that would burn. It would, you know, 2 or 3 of your neighbors' houses might go. That's why that pipe is angled up, so that you can wet down the bushes and the trees in the neighbors' houses, so you don't lose a couple of city blocks with just one house fire. So it gave them a real shot at that. And, you know, I think you can argue, for better or worse, it's one of the factors that allowed big metropolitan areas to grow.
Well, yeah, because I mean, in Arizona, there are so many towns that burnt down to the ground. I mean,
sure.
half of Bisbee.
Yep, there was, and I mean, and of course, we're also very susceptible to a lot of wildfires here too, as we know all too well now. But in those days, that if you had those hand pumpers, and it's a thing I always mention to people, that it's kind of, it wasn't by design, but it's very right that this museum ended up in Phoenix, because Phoenix has always prided itself on being cutting edge, innovative, you know, state of the art in its fire department, going all the way back to the 1800s. But especially in later years, we'll talk a little bit about that later, about their innovations in communication. And there was the great chiefs here like Alan Brunacini and Gray Crabtree and Glendale, who really created new ways of doing things, and fire in the fire service, and the incident command system and mutual aid and all that. A lot of that stuff originated here. And so, you know, Phoenix actually has a very rich history when it comes to firefighting history. Plus, it's a good place for a collection of old motor vehicles, because things don't like to rust here. And the wooden antiques do well too, because things don't like to rot here. It's dusty, but that's the worst thing you can say about it.
Right. So is that hand pumper from 1725?
It is from 1725. It was 7 years before old George was born. And it was built in England by a company called Newsham. It was built in London, served a little private estate in the north of England, but it probably served the village nearby as well. But that was a really popular make. It was a guy named Newsham, and he was a great marketer. He built like 5 of these for the royal family and presented them to them. And then, of course, in his advertising, it was like, it was used by the royal family, you know. And So it was he had a lot of success. He sold a bunch of these to colonial America. You know, they always talk about Ben Franklin was one of the founded one of the first volunteer fire brigades in the country. That's probably the kind of thing they used. If it wasn't that, it may well have been that, but if it wasn't, it was something very like that. Peter the Great bought a bunch of them for Imperial Russia. They were all over the continent. It was what they called the Newsham fifth size pumper, excuse me, and it was a big success.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. So question 3, the mural on this hand pumper shows that it's from where?
The great and little state of Rhode Island. You'd have to know that that's the Great Seal of the state of Rhode Island with the word hope on it. That's probably my favorite piece in the whole museum is this. You don't get the full glory of it from this photo, but it's this big, magnificent, what they call Philadelphia style pumper. It's a double-decker pumper with 2 sets of handles on either side, and you had one set of firefighters up on these platforms, 12 guys working the top set, and on the ground you had 13 guys working the bottom set of handles, and the same on the other side. So in all, it took 50 guys to work it. And it's this, again, you don't get the full impression of it from that photo, but it's a real work of art. It's got what's called the condenser box. It's got these murals, and that's one of them, the Great Seal of Rhode Island. On one side, there was also Rebecca at the well from the Old Testament. On another side was Saint Euphemia in the Orthodox Catholic Church. She was a saint who supposedly the Romans tried to feed her to the lions. The lions liked her. They wouldn't eat her. So they threw her, as Romans were wont to do sometimes, into the fiery furnace, the famous fiery furnace. And supposedly she came out unscathed. So obviously firefighters would like her. And then on the far side, there's an Indian chief, a Native American sachem from what's now Massachusetts, from the 1600s. He was King Philip, and he's on the Great Seal of the state of Massachusetts, but he was a Pawtucket, and that piece served in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. So they had him on there. And it's really just beautiful and elegant and, kind of lushly 19th century, maybe even a little gaudy. And it's a great lesson in when you see the stuff in our museum that's really elegant and really fancy, most of the time, those are American pieces. We have pieces from England, from Germany, from France, from Japan, from the 1880s. They're handsome, nice looking, well-made pieces, but they don't have that kind of theatrical flair that American firefighters loved. American firefighters, they didn't just want to get to the fire. They wanted to look good getting there, and they had, so they loved something that was fancy and elegant. And like a lot of things in American culture, it derives from competition. It's, if the guys in the next town over, or the guys at the station, a few blocks away had some big, beautiful piece of equipment, right away, these guys had to start getting together money for an even bigger, more beautiful. So that was really where that came from. And in a more restrained way, it continues to this very day. But yeah, when you see the really fancy ones, it's usually going to be like, we have one that looks like something that it's just a parade carriage. It's not actually to take to a fire, but it looks like what Cinderella went to the ball in. The kids say it every time, and that's by accident. It's quite elegant. And that, again, it's true of firefighters everywhere, really, but I think it tends to be a kind of an American tradition, particularly in the fire service.
All right. So question 4. So this hand pumper, and now we know why it's called a hand pumper. It was used to fight what fire? And it was the Great Chicago Fire of 1871.
That's right. We're coming up on, I believe it is the 150th anniversary of the Great Chicago Fire this very year. And the Great Chicago Fire was, everybody, Marshall, can I ask you, why traditionally it started, supposedly?
So I would, there's always the legend about Mrs. O'Leary and her cow.
Exactly. Mrs. O'Leary's cow is what they said at the time, and what kind of went down to legend as a cow in a barn on DeKoven Street there in Chicago that didn't feel like getting milked one night, kicked over a kerosene lamp. The barn went up. There was a little delay in getting the call in, and 4 days later, almost a third of the city of Chicago had burned down. More than 200 people had died. It was a terrible fire. Mrs. O'Leary always denied it. She said the cow got a bum rap. She said she was in bed and that wasn't the cause. And most historians now think that probably wasn't the cause, that it's true. The one newspaper in which it appeared was notorious for trying to stir up anti-immigrant hatred against the Irish. And so Chicago had seen this huge influx of Irish immigrants in the 10 years or so prior to the fire. And so there was apparently one newspaper that sort of fed that resentment of the previous residents and never missed a chance to try to make Irish folks look bad. And so that's an example of that. What actually they say now it might have been, there are various scenarios and theories, but what they say it might have been was a meteor shower. It had been a very dry year all over the upper Midwest, and people saw fireballs fall out of the sky, and there were wildfires, terrible ones, all over the upper Midwest at that time. As a matter of fact, the same week, the same couple of days as the Great Chicago Fire, there was a horrible fire. I mentioned it as another possible answer. The Peshtigo Fire, which was in Wisconsin and went over the border into a little bit of Michigan. It was a horrific fire, killed over 1,000 people. In terms of fatality, it's not only the worst fire in American history recorded, but the worst fire recorded in human history, except war, stuff caused by war, like, Hiroshima or Dresden or something like that. But just the worst kind of naturally starting fire was the Peshtigo Fire. It also has its grim anniversary this year. But the guys in that little town in Wisconsin where that hand pumper came from, a little place called Centerville, Wisconsin, you can tell because it's named the Badger Fire Company on the hose. They loaded that little pumper, that little Rumsey pumper from St. Louis, Missouri from the 1860s onto a flat car and took it by train down to Chicago. And they didn't get there till the fourth day, so it's hard to say how much was really left to do, but they sprayed a little water on the tail end of the Great Chicago Fire. So it's near and dear to our hearts for that reason. But it is fascinating. It's that, and I'm sure as well as anybody, that kind of funky way that history works where, everybody remembers Mrs. O'Leary's cow and the hot time in the old town and all that stuff. And hardly anybody, fire buffs and people from that part of the country, but otherwise not many people remember the Peshtigo Fire of October of 1871.
All right. And so here we are at the halfway point, question 5. And so this beautiful 1910 Phoenix Fire Department wagon used sodium bicarbonate. Oh, I remember it's like when I was a kid, I think we had like a little kid, like a grease fire on the stove. Sure. And I think my mom used Arm & Hammer to put it out.
Yeah, well, but that's the thing. You can use sodium bicarbonate to put out some fires. Never want to put it on a grease fire. It'll just make it worse. But sodium bicarbonate, this rig, I wanted to focus as much as I could, Marshall, on the stuff that we have that's from Arizona. You also see it's stacked with basketballs because we're so geeking out down here over the Suns. And during the playoffs, if you buy a helmet level that is $65 or higher membership to the museum, you get a free basketball signed by firefighters. Who needs, Chris Paul and Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton to sign your basketball when you can have a bunch of firefighters sign it? But anyway, yes, in those, you can kind of see under there's these kind of coppery colored tanks, and they're full of water, very compressed water and sodium carbonate that's been dissolved into it. So being as fond of cocktails as I know you to be, Marshall, you'll appreciate they're basically big seltzer bottles. And but what you do when you get them to a fire, this thing, Phoenix got it in 1910. They bought it from the Chicago Fire Department. But when it would roll up first, and then you could introduce a little bit of sodium bicarbonate, or excuse me, of sulfuric acid into that tank, and the reaction between that and the sodium bicarb would create an extremely powerful blast of water onto the fire. It didn't last very long, but it was really powerful. And so it was what they called an initial attack vehicle. You could roll up to it, blast that fire, kind of knock it down, dampen it. And when other guys showed up with their steam pumpers, by that time, it would be, by 1910, it would have been steam pumpers. When they rolled up, you kind of maybe already had the fire a little bit, on the ropes, and they could, because it took them a lot longer, often to get there, and also to get set up to put water on the fire. So it didn't give you a lot of water, but it gave you a lot of power in the short time that you used it. So yeah, and that's sodium bicarb. It's handy stuff, not just in seltzer water.
Indeed. All right, so this 1951 American LaFrance fire truck hails from Miami, Arizona.
Correct. This truck is an American LaFrance, a cab forward 1951 American LaFrance, very, very popular, legendary make of fire trucks. A lot of, Ford makes fire trucks, Chevy and Dodge make fire trucks, Mack makes fire trucks. But there were a few companies that specialized in making fire trucks. And probably the most famous of those was American LaFrance, then out of Elmira, New York. And they made that truck in 1951 for the city of Miami, Arizona. And after they retired it, Miami gave it to us very kindly. And can we see the picture again super quick?
Of course.
Okay. What you may notice about it is that there's steps leading up to it. The doors are blocked open, and there's not one of our, verboten weight chains around this thing. So this is for kids and anybody who wants to climb on. It's a truck that we don't take as much obsessive care over the finish of it and the paint and all that stuff. And as a result, kids have spent, and not just kids, grown-ups too.
I was going to say,
yeah,
I'm like,
including me, my wife and I, many years ago, before our daughter came along, did our Christmas card, sitting up in the front seat there. And my daughter spent, plenty of time climbing on that truck over the years. That's the one that we let people board. And as a result, it's probably the most beloved truck that we have here in the museum. It's there in Gallery 2. And people have a lot of fun on it.
Well, yeah, because little kids love big things, and you can't get much bigger than a fire truck.
No, it's, I like, we do so many, there's thousands of little kids come through here every year. And it's, for the really, the 7-year-old and younger kids, one of the big things we do here is a story time, usually using this story. How do I get it there? There it is. No Dragons for Tea, which is a great story for teaching basic fire safety. And it's, essentially it's my favorite part of the job. It's great. These kids are a terrific audience, and you feel like you're maybe giving them something useful. I guess you never, at least in this life, you never know what kid didn't burn down his house because of what you told them, but you hope that it at least sets them on the right direction. And I like it. I would like it to be like a kind of a rite of passage for childhood here in the Valley. As you go through the Hall of Flame, you get the story, you get to climb on the truck. I think it's, the best thing we do here, probably. And we're a museum for all ages, and we do tours for all ages. If you're interested in a tour, adults, seniors, we love them. But probably the most fun is doing that for the very little kids, I think.
Nice. And Sarah wants to know about the drink for tonight. And so it is basically, so yesterday was National Dive Bar Day. So it's a riff on a 7 and 7. So it is made with Del Bach mesquite whiskey. So we are calling it a Smoky and 7 as an homage to that. And it's quite delicious. I'm like, That's really good. I think I might drink, well, not more of those right now, but it's super easy and so refreshing. I'm like, wow.
Thanks.
All right. So
I'm very envious for whatever that's worth.
All right. So question 7. So back in 1921, the Seagrave fire truck served what city? It was Phoenix.
So we're sitting right in that city, Phoenix, Arizona. This, I kind of, it's not the most flattering photo, but if I had taken its handsome front end, then it would have given away the question. This is a Seagrave, 1921 Seagrave. This was bought in 1921 by the Phoenix Fire Department, and it was only the fourth fire truck that Phoenix ever owned. It was at a station. Wow. 7th Street and I believe 7th Street in Osborne, a station that's still there. And they had it for many years, I think into the 1950s. And then it was sold and kind of changed hands a couple of times, ended up in the possession of a car dealer in Taos, New Mexico. And he had it just to look cool out in front of his car dealership, but it was out there in the New Mexico desert. It's getting blasted by sand and everything, and it's just kind of going to hell. And it started looking worse and worse over the years. And finally, at some point in like the 70s, something like that, the town fathers or whatever came to this guy and said, look, that thing looks like junk. You got to get it out of there. It's making us look bad. And so apparently this guy just towed it out into the desert and left it in the desert off the road in Taos there. And the founder of the museum came by and saw this hunk of junk lying in the desert, went into town, asked around, soon figured out who owned it, got it essentially for nothing, and brought it back. And our beloved restorer, a man named Don Hale, he just passed on about 7 years ago at the age of 94. He had only retired about a year before that. He did work on 80 to 90%, if not more, of what you'd see when you come in the museum. Whatever, you can see his signature on a lot of these pieces, including that one. He, using one photo to serve as a guide, he was able to restore it to something of its former glory. And it, honestly, to me, it looks like it just rolled off the assembly line. And it's beautiful, but it had to kind of hit bottom before it crawled back into the great beauty that it's at now. But it's a great. Seagrave it actually began in Michigan as a ladder company. Literally, they made ladders for cherry in there in Michigan, and gradually they started building fire apparatus as well. And they're very, maybe not quite as popular as American LaFrance, but very, very close. And we have a number of really beautiful Seagraves. I'm real fond of them. Wow.
What a great story of how it even got to the museum. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I know. It's not uncommon that, to me, that I mean, we have a rig here that was donated by Gene Autry, the cowboy star, of 1930 Moreland from the Los Angeles County the Los Angeles County Forestry Department, and served what's now, believe it or not, Topanga Canyon. Now it's Ritzyville, but in those days it was kind of a wilderness area. And so they had a wildland station there. It's one of my favorite trucks in the museum. I didn't include it in this quiz, but yeah, Gene Autry found it rusted out somewhere in his property in Southern California, brought it to Don, and Don brought it back to its green glory. And, I guess supposedly Gene came for the dedication, and when he saw what a good job Don had done, he kind of wanted it back, but he didn't get it back. And he's not, nobody gets it back once you give it to him. So anyway, yeah. So anyway, but that's the story on, again, I was trying to emphasize the Arizona history we have here. We're an international collection.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, it's an amazing rate.
And that's one of our most beautiful of them.
All right. And then so question 8. So they actually have the rig that carried the Granite Mountain Hot Shots.
One of the two
passed away back in the Yarnell Hill fire back in 2013. And they were based out of Prescott, Arizona.
That is correct. You did a very nice tribute to Yarnell. I had the honor, along with one of our great volunteers here at the museum, Gary Bowling, we went up together to the dedication of that new park. And
nice.
it was quite lovely to see it. It was very moving. That, you know, Mother Nature was a great stage manager that day. While they were reading off the names of the 19, there was this thunder rumbling in the distance. It was very enthralling. But I think the folks there in Yarnell are going to enjoy that park for a very, very long time. They did a great job with it. But that was a terrible day for us here in Arizona and really all over the country. The loss of 19 hotshots, the Granite Mountain hotshots, which were wildland firefighters, and it was kind of an experimental program. They were based, they were the only, as far as I know, the only hotshot crew that was based out of a city fire department, Prescott, rather than federal or state forestry departments. And it was a 20-man crew. They ended up in a situation that has caused tragedies like this before. In 1949, the Man Gulch fire in Montana killed 14 young guys. And in the early 90s, the South Canyon fire in Colorado caused the death of 16 men and women. And then there was this one, which took the lives of 19 just terrific guys. And one guy survived. He had been stationed as a lookout just a little distance away. He probably would have also died, but just by sheer luck, somebody went by from another crew in a pickup truck and managed to give him a ride out. And he's had, obviously he had some pretty rough survivor's guilt and stuff like that after he's I guess he's doing well now. But the Yarnell Hill fire was terrible. It was the biggest loss of wildland firefighters. It was the biggest loss of firefighters, period, since 2001, since 9/11 in New York. And it was the biggest loss of wildland firefighters since, believe it or not, 1933, the Griffith Park fire in Los Angeles. But what it had in common with those other two fires, the one in Montana and the one in Colorado, was that they started out too close to the fire, and then a cold front came in, the wind changed, and the fire was coming toward them, and the escape routes were uphill. So it's just this recipe for disaster. And it seems like kind of once a generation this happens, and everybody's like, oh God, that's horrible, but we've learned from our mistake, it won't happen again. And then, time goes by and people forget, and it happens again. And so hopefully this really will be the last time. But we're very proud. You talk about how it came to us that they abandoned the program. They didn't restaff the hotshots after that incident, and they just put those two in the two transport buggies, as they call them, in a city garage in Prescott, and they sat there for a few years, and then they took them out to use in the movie Only the Brave that they made about that incident, and then they put them back, and they were going to sell them as surplus city property. Well, the guy who's vice president of the County Fire Museum of Los Angeles, it's in Bellflower, very good museum, not as good as us, but very good. And if you're in LA, it's very definitely something you should put on your list. Is to go down there and see it. But anyway, this guy, his oldest son was one of the guys who died in the Yarnell Hill fire. And he didn't want to see these just sold like to a plumbing company or something like that. And so he got an anonymous donor in LA to put up a $25,000 bid for both of those buggies. And it was the only bid that was made. It was accepted. And the one that his son wrote in went to the County Fire Museum in LA. The other one came to us. It's the only vehicle we have from the 21st century, and it is one of the few vehicles that we don't own. It's actually on a kind of semi-permanent loan to us from County Fire Museum.
Now, Doreen asks, I guess in the late 80s, there were inmates who were killed fighting fires in Arizona.
Yes. Yeah, their wildland firefighting crews have a real interesting history. It's extremely arduous, difficult work, and it's very unglamorous. That you don't have the romantic thing of shooting a hose at a fire. It's digging in the dirt, because what you're doing, of course, you can't put out a wildfire. What you do is you contain it. So you cut down all the trees and you dig up all the flammable surface and you create a fire break that the fire can't get across. And that's how you contain a wildland fire. And it's, I mean, even compared to structure firefighting, it's really dangerous and it's really difficult. It's really hard. You got to be, you know, unbelievably almost like superhero fit to do that work, and a little bit crazy maybe. And so that, and sometimes it's been hard to get people to do that work. There was a terrible fire in 1910 called the Big Blow Up. It was up in both Washington State, Idaho, and British Columbia. And something like 70 people died in that disaster. Most of them were guys like cowboys and miners and people like that. They weren't really firefighters, but they got pressed into service to work fighting it. And they ended up, there was a terrible death toll from that. And over the years, different folks, I mean, you know, for a long time, wildland firefighting was part-time work. And also it was convict labor sometimes. Your viewer is exactly correct, and there were casualties. Also, there have been a lot of Native American crews here in Arizona who did a lot of wildland firefighting. But yes, convict crews. I mean, it was a volunteer thing, I think, but convict crews have been used many times. Matter of fact, up in the Northwest, I don't know if people remember from the 1970s the case of D.B. Cooper, who was who had loot, and he bailed out of an airplane and they never found him. They don't know if he escaped or if maybe he died in parachuting, but there are still people who believe, kind of the way he behaved and the place he chose to bail out, that he might have been a wildland firefighter at some point in his career. So it's got a real unusual, you know, you cut from an unusual kind of cloth. If you even by firefighter standards, and that's saying something, you're cut from an unusual kind of cloth to be a wildland firefighter.
All right. So question 9. Smoky is the symbol of the U.S. Forest Service. The official real Smoky hailed from New Mexico.
Yeah, Arizona was a red herring this time. He was from area of Capitan, New Mexico. And I'm really happy, Marshall, to hear you call him Smokey the Bear, because I grew up calling him Smokey the Bear. You know, he had a middle name, right?
Yeah.
And so the Forest Service guys can get really irritable about it. They think he should just be Smokey Bear. So but you know, the old song used Smokey the Bear. The guy who wrote the song said he just needed an extra syllable. But still, I get a real kick out of just annoying the Forest Service guys by calling him Smokey the Bear. This is a poster from the Forest Service from the 50s. We also have one of the original Smokey the Bear suits. I love this poster because, you know, it's teaching kids to be careful with smokes, which, you know, we always appreciate that lesson, right? But it came from the 1950s. My wife actually found it in an antique shop, and that's what it's doing in our collection. But we have a nice collection of Smokey memorabilia. He's one of the really iconic figures in kind of, I mean, in a way you could kind of say advertising. Although he's not specifically to advertise things, he's to advertise people not burning the forests down, is what it is. His big thing, as I hope all of your viewers know, is only you can prevent. Now he says usually wildfires. And back when I was a kid, he said forest fires, but at some point he realized it isn't just forests that burn. You know, wild deserts can burn, as we know all too well here in Arizona, prairies, whatever. But the real Smokey, I mean, the drawing existed from the mid 1940s, but the official real Smokey was a little black bear, a cub, who, sad to say, lost his mom in the Capitan Gap fire, a pretty bad forest fire in New Mexico in 1950. And he got pretty badly hurt in that fire as well. But I guess the park rangers rescued him. He's just a tiny little guy clinging to a tree. They rescued him. They took him to the vet. And the vet patched him up, and he gradually got better. They originally called him Hot Foot Teddy because he burned his little feet in in the fire. But I guess he also smelled like smoke for a long time after the fire. So they gave him the name Smokey. And, he was very cute, but he was a bear and he was getting bigger. They couldn't keep him, and they couldn't turn him loose. So he wouldn't have been able to take care of himself out in the forest. And so they talked the National Zoo in Washington, D.C. into taking him on. And he lived in the National Zoo for many years. When I was a kid in the late 60s and went with my family to the National Zoo, I always try to impress the kids with this. They never are. But I saw the real Smokey. I remember it's a very vivid early memory. He was quite old by then, but he went to bear heaven just a couple of years later. And when he did, they took his body back to Capitan, New Mexico. I guess he has a grave site and a little museum there, which I keep wanting to get over and see. But he looked like a cool guy, and he was. But what's so vivid in my memory is that even all those years later, you could still see the burn spot on his front legs and his chest and his face where he'd been burned, all those years later. And so he was a great kind of living lesson. I mean, of course, most animals aren't as lucky as he was. A lot of them die, but even if they don't, it makes it hard for them to find fresh water, food, shelter, all that stuff. So, he's just a great way to remind not just kids, but grownups, that when you go out into all this beautiful wilderness that we have here, the desert or the forest or whatever, that's somebody's home too. There's all this beautiful wilderness that we have out here, and there's all this wonderful plant and animal life that lives there. And when there's a fire, it messes up their lives, just like a fire in our house or whatever, our building or whatever, messes up our lives. So it's, he's been a great ambassador over the years. And, everybody loves Smokey. There was Gary Snyder, the famous beat poet, wrote the public domain poem, the about Smokey the Bear that anybody can use. And he's just a really beloved figure. Some people say that Yogi is like his less successful younger brother, but he's kind of yeah.
Well, yeah. And my friend Deb actually took her daughter and granddaughter to go see Smokey's grave in New Mexico.
Oh, I envy them. I'd really like to get over there and see that. I'm hoping to go sometime.
And I didn't realize Smokey the Bear was 77 years old.
Yes. The initial poster was painted by an artist named Albert Stahl, and it was just Smokey with a bucket of water pouring, and it said, "Smokey says, put out your fires," or whatever, something like that. And he looks basically the same, a little chubbier and a little kind of rougher than the figure that we came to see. But it was, he's got a long history. I believe he's administered by the Ad Council, but the copyright actually belongs to the Forest Service.
Okay.
I should say the Department of the Interior.
Nice. All right. And then our last question is about the alarm room, which became influential on alarm rooms in the country as well as internationally. And it's from where? Phoenix, Arizona.
Right here, just like the Seagrave. It's from right here in Phoenix, Arizona. We have this here at the museum. This is the alarm room from the Phoenix Fire Department from the mid 1950s to the early-ish 1980s. So if any of your viewers called the fire department during that stretch of time, this is probably where the call went. And what you can see there is people sat at those consoles, and there's a big map. It's Phoenix as it was then. It would be bigger now. And they don't really come across in this picture, but there are festive, Christmassy looking red and green lights all over that map. Those are fire stations. Green light meant that the trucks were there. They were home. They were in the station. Red light meant that for whatever reason, they were out. And you would locate your incident using an IBM punch card system, and you would calculate what the nearest station was. And they would send that station. And if it was a red light station, you'd have to calculate where the nearest green light station was. Now, it seems kind of primitive and quaint to us now, but the truth is, again, like the early hand pumpers, it was a huge leap forward. 2 Phoenix firefighters designed it, and people came from, it was enormously influential. People came from all over the world to check out this technology and take it back to their hometowns. And it's, you know, the basic concept of it remains in place to this day. If you can ever get them to give you the tour, it's not always the easiest tour to get, but if you can get a tour of the Phoenix Fire Department now, and you see their alarm room, their version of that, it's like something out of Star Trek. It's everything's from, you know, satellites in outer space, and there's photographic imagery, and you can exactly pinpoint where the incident is and everything. So it's, I mean, it's almost scary how much they can see from space, but you know, here's the motorcycle accident, and here, you know, is the ambulance getting closer to it. And so if you're the guy in the motorcycle accident, you're grateful for it. So it's one of the important pieces that we have. And it's pretty recent vintage. You know, I had a group, I gave a tour to a group of ham radio guys, and one of the guys who was in this group had worked in that room. He had been a dispatcher, and so I just sort of turned
wow.
Yeah, he gave us this great, a lot of stuff I stole for my own tours, but we have a picture in there on the little placard of guys, and you know, looking very 70s, sitting at those consoles. And I just jokingly said, "Is that you in the picture?" And the guy goes, "No, he was best man at my wedding." So it was, you know, it's kind of nearby history, right. But it's. And we also have we monitor the Phoenix Fire radio now. So I mean, if people hear chatter on the radio now, that's real live stuff they're hearing. You know,
wow.
On a tape. Yeah. So it's just one of the many things, Marshall, that you know, a lot of them are national or international, but as you can see, a number of them actually have local history relevance, and we're really proud to be the home for them.
Indeed. Well, people know the drill. Some folks have already started posting their scores. So I always ask, how did people do? But I always remind them, you know, it's not how many you got right, but it's more about the stories that you've shared with us. We now have so much more knowledge about this, and hopefully even a few more visitors coming now to your museum because they've realized what's behind those doors.
We hope so.
So
and I really appreciate you having me on, Marshall. It's really, really good to be with you and with your viewers today.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your night.
You do the same, sir. Thanks.
Will do.
Go Suns.
Indeed, go Suns. All right. So, you know, you might have been wondering, why do you think you should share? Now you know why you should share, because we had so much fun. Again, thank you, Mark, for sharing all those great stories. And I'm hoping that some of these folks now in the chat will be like, oh, I need to go there, so they can share and learn more about it and see some of those. I know, it's like, and who knew the meteors likely were the cause of Chicago fire? I was like, it wasn't Mrs. O'Leary cow. All right. So, you know, so now we have show and tell. And so I was actually, I was kind of dusting. And so one of the things I do is I also have a whole collection of trophies, because I just love the fact. And this one is actually last place back in 1967-68 for Helen Glentsos. Now, you might not know that name. You might not know her kind of importance, but her family started the Grand Cafe, which was at 325 West Adams, which is now the U.S. Bank building, or if it's still U.S. Bank, I haven't been down it in a while, so it may have changed by now. But it opened up in 1920 and was open through the early 30s and was really kind of the nicest restaurant in town, famous for tablecloths, candles, and everything else. So I love how just a little bad bowling trophy can connect. I mean, they were big in the Greek community here. And I mean, that's the same space that then later on became the Jungle Bar with the Flame. So such an iconic spot. And all from a little bad bowling trophy because she got last place. So next week is going to be a really exciting week. So we have my friend Tara and Deidre on. So Deirdre actually ran for Senate a few years ago, and her and Tara went across the entire state in hijabs, stopping in small towns across Arizona campaigning. And so we're going to come on and talk about some of those adventures they had in some of those small towns. I mean, and I love them because, I mean, they just bring such light and energy to whatever they are doing. And so that's going to be a really fun episode next week. So it is the same Thursday at 7 o'clock. So remember, if you have any stories you would like to share that you might not have been able to mention here, you know, please throw those to me in email, or you can throw them to me on Instagram or even on Facebook, because that is honestly how I find some of my best stories. Now, I do want to give a shout out to PJ, who came up with our Smokey and Seven, our homage to bars, to National Dive Bar Day, as well as for our firefighting history. So he hit it out of the park. I'm going to make more of these over the summer. And we're getting ready to. We'll close out the evening with a video that is found film footage from Arizona. Some of it is actually from the Library of Congress. Some of it is from my own archives. Background music is by Mr. Hose Orchestratica, who is East Coast based, but originally from Sunny Slope. And that intro video we showed was from my friend Chris, who created the video, and Cole, who designed the music, wrote it from scratch. So thank you all so much for joining us. Have a great rest of your night. And, you know, I don't know where the game is at this moment, but go Suns.